Hello everybody, welcome back to the AdvancedVape channel. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of an introduction or feature for the Alleria Rta. So as you can see right now, I have it fully disassembled, and we're going to put a wick in it real quick and then put it back together, and I'm going to talk about it just a little bit. So I'm not going to be doing a build on this today, and the reason for that is that it's a velocity style deck, and so there's really nothing new to show there. It's just a general standard velocity style deck. It is a little bit smaller than the Griffin. This is 14mm build deck size, and the Griffin is 16, I believe. So I have a Vertebraid build in there, 2.5mm diameter, and I believe 7 wraps. So I'm just going to leave that build in there, but I am going to wick it on camera so you can see how I like to do that. And then we're going to move on and just talk about the tank in general. So let's go on and zoom up close and start the wicking. Okay, so we're zoomed in here, and we're just gonna wick this up. And I prefer to use cotton on this tank. As you know, if you watch my videos, I tend to use rayon for most builds, but on this one I prefer cotton, and in this case I'm going to be using cotton bacon. So this is another one of those RTAs that you want to go with just a tiny bit of wick, for me anyway. So I'm going to separate out a pretty small strand. This might be a little too big. We'll pinch it down if it is. So you want there to be just a little bit of resistance there, not very much at all. Okay, so we've got them both in there, and it's the size that I prefer. I know that it's making full contact with the coils, but it's a pretty small amount of cotton. And so that's what I'm going to stick with, and I feel that that works the best for any VG level juice in this tank. So I'm going to wick this differently than I do the Griffin. As you know, if you've watched the wick techniques that I have on the Griffin, I take the wick ring off and I use it to guide the wick on there, and then I make little air channels. And so I'm doing that totally different with this tank. That doesn't really work with this tank very well. So this wick ring, it is removable, but it's pressure fit on there, so there's no threads there. And you'd pull it up, and then you'd have to kind of pressure fit it back down, and it just doesn't work very well to do that method. And additionally, there is one side, it's kind of hard to catch on camera, but there's one side, which is this side here, that's flat, and the rest is totally round. So I'm not really sure why they did that. I'm guessing just to make sure that it fits on in the right orientation or whatever, but this wick channel is going to be slightly smaller than the rest because it's flat there. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're going to install the wicks, and I'm not really sure why they did that, but it doesn't seem to affect the performance too much, so we'll just move on. So when I'm deciding the length of the wick, I'm going to go right about there at the bottom of that ring. So I'm going to pull it down and put my scissors up in there. And do the same all the way around. So now that we've got them cut, I'm going to just use my tweezers and tuck them down in those channels. And you want to be kind of gentle, you don't want to cram it down in there. If you feel like you need to really be forceful and stick it down in there, then you probably have too much cotton. It should just slide right in. So I'm going to get it packed all the way in, and then at the very end we'll clean it up a little bit. We'll go all the way around and do the same. And on the side with the flat edge, you need to be a little bit more careful with how tightly you're packing it in there. because there's slightly less room. At least that's what it appears to me. Okay, so we've got them all packed in there. And now I'm going to go around and just kind of scoot them up just a little bit. That was a little bit too much. I don't want to pull it out. I just want them to be loosely packed in there. Just like that. So you gotta kind of have to be gentle. Okay. So I haven't really found it necessary to make those air channels on this tank, which is good because that increases the difficulty on something like the Griffin. So this thing is fairly easy to wick. I haven't had any issues. I haven't had any dry hits with it. I'm going to go on and add juice. Okay, and now let's zoom out and put it all back together. Alright, so it comes with this kind of cage for the tank, for the glass section, I mean. And the glass is kind of held with O-rings there. This one's not quite stuck on there, but that's not really a big deal. So the glass goes in one side and it's kind of caught. Just drop it in and it's held there. And then you have the top section, and one of the coolest things about this tank is that it uses a glass chimney. And I really like that feature. I thought it would be a little bit gimmicky, like that would be the only thing that this tank really offers, but that's really not the case at all. And it ends up being pretty cool and pretty useful. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I have it fully assembled. So I'm going to screw this in there. And you want to make sure that it's tightened down. And that brings me into one of the biggest problems that I have with this tank, is the sharp edges. I don't know if you can see, but there's cuts all along my fingers. And that is only from this tank. And that's from holding on right here. These edges are pretty sharp, and trying to tighten it down, or if it gets stuck, this knurling here will just shred your fingers. So it's something that you kind of have to be careful of, and it's just one of those little machining issues that some tanks have. And I've also heard that they've made adjustments to this RTA and are coming out with one that has much more rounded edges and less problems like that. So that's really not a huge con for me. That's not going to keep me from using this tank, but it is something that I should mention. And then the bottom section just goes straight in. I've had a little bit of a problem trying to get it to be lined up. Ideally, I would want it to look like that inside, so you can kind of show off your build, and it's just lined up right with the posts along these posts. And I haven't really been able to do that successfully, and I've talked to some people and had a few suggestions, but I haven't really been able to figure that out all the way. As you can see, when it's fully tightened in, it's kind of at an angle. You know, I've tried putting in at different positions along the way, and it doesn't seem to make that big a difference. It's just something I'll keep working with, and if I can figure it out, or if somebody has a better suggestion, leave it in the comments, and I'll put it in this video. I'm going to go ahead and fill it up with juice. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to talk about the juice flow control. It uses the drip tip, which is kind of creative. These little notches along the drip tip slide into these notches here. And I'll try and get it so you can see it. The glass section is rotating and slowly lifting up or lowering down. So right now it's all the way up, and that would mean the juice flow is all the way open. And you can screw it all the way down. Obviously this would normally be with the top on. I'm just kind of holding it like this just to demonstrate. Okay, that's all the way down. And so now that it's closed all the way, I'll refill it. Top fill is easy. We've got these large fill holes, so it's not a problem. Okay, we'll put the top cap on. And then slide the drip tip in. So because this drip tip is kind of special, it has those little notches, you can't use other drip tips and still control the chimney. You can put any drip tip you want in here, but only this one will be able to control the chimney, so you would have to kind of carry this one around with you if you still wanted to be able to control the chimney and use your own drip tip. So that's a little con, but for me, I like this drip tip, so really not an issue. I'm going to open up the juice flow just a couple turns. And as you can see, if I can get focus, those wicks are very much saturated. And that's kind of where I like them to be. If I wanted it to be less saturated, I could add a little bit more cotton. But I like it like that. It's kind of a dripper experience. And that's generally what I go for. So I've got the airflow open all the way. And let's go on and give it a try. I usually like to do it about 62 watts for this build, somewhere around there. Very strong flavor. That's really where this tank shines, is flavor and performance. So you've heard me kind of complain a little bit about the machining and everything, and how it's cut up my fingers, and just the little things like the drip tip and not being able to line up the coils right, or at least me not being able to. I've heard of other people being able to just fine. But those are all kind of little quibbles, you know, they're not something that would keep me from using this tank. And really what brings me back to it is the flavor. That small chamber in there gives really good performance, even with the smaller build. And I'm really impressed with the flavor that this has. really impressive flavor. And I think it's cool that you can see the build with a glass chimney and see when you need to re-wick it or see if it's not wicking properly. And I haven't had any issues with dry hits or nothing like that. And it's overall, it's easy to build on. But it's just one of those tanks that has just a few issues, like I talked about. And another one would be the small grub screws in there. But that's going to be the same for anything with that size build deck. Those small grub screws can strip out kind of easily just because they're tiny. Overall, though, if someone asked me, should I buy this tank? I would say yes, because the flavor is really good with this build in there. I've tried all different kinds of stainless steel builds in there so far, and I've been happy with all of them. It does really well with Twisted and Vertebraid, and some different type of wire builds that I've been working on. And overall, it's just a good tank, and I'm happy with it. And I would like to continue to do videos with this tank on the channel. Take a couple more hits and we'll wrap it up. Nice dense flavor and just all around a good tank if you can look past the little issues that I talked about. And like I said, they're coming out with an updated version that has most of those issues fixed. So that really kind of takes away all of the cons that I can think of. But as of right now, it's worth buying, but just keep in mind the cons that I talked about. And I'd love to hear your experience with this tank or what you think about this video. Just leave a comment, give us a like, and subscribe to our channel if you like it. And we'll keep on putting out more videos like this.